Welcome back to the Anything I Feel Like Doing is My Right channel. I'm the Wild Papist, and today we're going to be talking about rights. Okay, this is kind of a thing I just thought up. Okay, but there's all these talk of rights. You know what I mean? Everybody thinks they have the right to kind of just do whatever they want. Abortion is a right. Anything is a right. Free speech is a right. All this stuff is a right. We don't really know what that means anymore. So today I'm gonna take a look at uh what does God say our rights even are? What are we entitled to as human beings? And to do this I'm gonna take a look at Exodus 20, the Ten Commandments, because these are the 10 laws that are not to be broken under any circumstances. These are the outlines for what we can and cannot do, absolutely applied to everybody that ever existed, exists now, or ever will exist. We're going to start off Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, NRSV updated. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. Humans have the right to rest. We have the right to a day of rest. Okay, this is in complete opposition to modern capitalism that says that uh, it actually makes the circumstances so that work is above all else. You have to work as many hours as possible to make as much money as possible, and you have to be productive. You're especially in the West, especially in America, there's this kind of idea that it's shameful to not be, productive 24/7, 365. But that's just not what God says. That's not what God believes at all. Okay, in the Gospels, Jesus tells us that uh, the Sabbath was not made for God, it was made for men. It was made for humans. If you don't have at least that one day of rest, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to get exhausted. And I want to say this too, okay? The day of rest is not a day of housework, okay? The day of rest is a day of rest, okay? You can't work even 5 days of the week and then work all day Saturday and Sunday, on your doing all your chores and everything, and then wonder why you're constantly exhausted. The day of rest is a day of rest, okay? On Sunday, the Christian Sabbath, you go to church, okay? You go worship God and that's it, okay? That's all you're doing that day, okay? And then obviously things that have to be done, you know, take care of like make sure everybody's like fed, that like all your animals and everything, make sure they're fed and doing good. But you're not out running around shopping, doing chores, doing all this nonsense. You are resting on the day of rest, okay? You're not going to make it if you don't have that day of rest. So that's the first right, is you have a right to a day of rest. Hold on, I forgot to switch this back over. There we go. All right. And then we have Exodus 20, verse 13. Thou shalt not murder. You have the right to exist. You have the right to keep your life. Okay, that applies to all human beings at all stages. This is directly in opposition to the my body, my choice. pro-choice movement that says that abortion is the right of all women. It's not. You shall not murder. Okay? You shall not take the life of an innocent human being. Okay? It does not say you shall not murder born people. It says you shall not murder, period. You see the period right there. It says just a period right there. You shall not murder. Okay? All human beings have a right to exist and uphold their own existence. Okay? I didn't think we had to say that, but I mean, like, hundreds of millions of abortions. Um, we can go to war for oil and for Israel and all this stuff. We can go to war for our geopolitical interests. That's not what the Bible says, actually. And then I want to look at 2015 and 2017. Thou shalt not steal, and thou shalt not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, slave, ox, donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. You have a right to private property. You have a right to work for what you can. You have a right to work for your property and maintain that property, and you have the right to keep that property in your possession. Okay, a lot of, ignorant people like to say, "Oh, Jesus was a socialist. Jesus was a communist." Not really. Uh, God says that you have the right to private property. You shall not even covet somebody else's property because it's their right to have it. That's theirs. That's their property. You cannot steal that. And then 2016, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You have the right to truth. You have the right to seek truth. You have the right to uphold truth. And not only is that a right, you're obligated to do that. You're committing sin if you deny the truth, if you reject the truth, if you try and alter the truth, if you try and make up a false truth. So living your truth is actually not a right. Okay, there is truth, and you are not to bear false witness against that truth. So there it is. You have the right to rest, you have the right to life, and you have the right to your own personal property. And here, 2017 and 2014 ties into 2017. You shall not commit adultery. That ties into you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. If you have a wife, you have a right to that. Okay, that is your right to have a wife as a sacrament instituted by God. These are your rights. Your rights are actually very simple. Okay, I know a lot of people, especially Americans, we're all about our rights over here. But really, you're not entitled to as much as you think you're entitled to. You have the right to exist and own things and have access to the truth, and that's about it. And that's not to disparage legal rights, um, in the secular sense. But we have to understand that not that the rights granted to us by God override the rights upheld by society, by the government, by the earthly law. You can't just make up something that you want to do and say that it's your right to do it. Okay, objective morality, objective definitive truth says that you don't have that many rights, actually. And you can take some of these, like thou shalt not murder, you have the right to exist. And I would say that that's self-defense. You can apply that to self-defense. Um, so you can have, I would say that you can have, under a biblical model, you can have these secular rights that uphold your biblical objective rights, but they cannot contradict ever. Okay, so you have the right to keep and bear arms to defend yourself against, whoever, home invaders, foreign invaders, uh, a tyrannical government trying to get you. You have the right to do that because you have the right to exist. You have the right to not be murdered. Okay, so I guess that's really all I had to say about that one. You don't have that many rights. Uh, the rights you do have to be grounded in what God has granted to you. It's just my thoughts on that. That's all I really have. Submit to Rome, Hail Mary, Christ is King.